I used to believe there were certain lines people didn't cross. Not because they couldn't, but because once you did, you'd never be able to stand on the same ground again. Family was one of those lines. Marriage was another. I believed that even when love rotted, there were still bones of decency left behind. I was wrong about all of it, and I learned that lesson on an ordinary Wednesday night in early October. The kind of night that smells like rain and reheated leftovers. The kind of night you forget the moment it passes unless it detonates your life from the inside. Her name was Lauren. We'd been married 11 years. Not the glossy Instagram kind of marriage, but a real one with grocery lists stuck to the fridge, arguments about whether the light bill was higher because of my computer or her hairdryer. Quiet reconciliations that happened without words. We lived in a modest two-story house outside Columbus, Ohio, the sort of neighborhood where everyone waves but nobody really knows each other. I worked in logistics for a regional distributor. Decent pay, long hours, predictable stress. Lauren worked in marketing for a healthcare network. Sharper tongue than she realized, smarter than she let most people see. No kids. We said we were waiting for the right time, though if I'm honest, I think we were both afraid of what children might reveal about us. My father, Richard, lived 15 minutes away in a retirement community that smelled like lawn fertilizer and artificial vanilla. My mother had died 4 years earlier from a fast, merciless cancer, and since then Dad had been orbiting our lives more closely, dropping by unannounced, calling too often, lingering too long. I told myself it was grief. Lauren told me it was loneliness. We were both right, and both dangerously wrong about what that loneliness would turn into. The night everything changed, Lauren came home late. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how calm she was. Too calm. She put her purse down carefully, like she didn't want it to make noise. She didn't kiss me hello. She didn't complain about traffic or her boss or the new intern she hated. She just stood in the kitchen, looking at me like she was measuring something. "I need to tell you something," she said. Those words always sound the same, but they land differently depending on the silence around them. This silence was heavy, pressurized. I remember noticing stupid details. The hum of the refrigerator, a chip in the countertop we'd never fixed, the way her wedding ring caught the light when she folded her hands. "I slept with your dad last night," she said. No shaking, no tears, just a sentence, delivered like a weather report. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. My brain reached for safer explanations. A bad joke, a test, some grotesque metaphor I didn't understand. "What?" I said, which felt inadequate, like using a bandage for a gunshot wound. She exhaled slowly. "I'm not drunk. I'm not joking. I slept with him." I felt something detach inside me, like a cable snapping. Not pain at first, distance, like I'd stepped outside my body and was watching a scene play out through thick glass. "How?" I asked, because my mind wanted logistics, anything concrete to grab onto. "It just happened," she said, and even as she said it, I saw the lie sitting there, ugly and obvious. Things like that don't just happen. They are built brick by brick, choice by choice. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that startled us both. "Congrats," I said. The word tasted metallic. "That's impressive. You aiming for a full family tour, or was this a one-time thing?" She flinched then, not at the sarcasm, but at the coldness. I could see her recalculating, realizing this wasn't going to be the messy, emotional breakdown she might have prepared for. "I didn't plan it," she said, "but I'm not sorry." That was the moment the numbness cracked and something darker started to seep in. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter, something patient. I nodded. "Okay," I said. "Then we're done." She blinked. "Done?" "Yes. You should probably pack some things." She stared at me, confused now. "You're not even going to yell?" "No," I said. "I don't see the point." She searched my face like she was looking for a trap. Maybe there was one already forming. I just hadn't named it yet. She went upstairs eventually. I stayed in the kitchen long after the house went quiet, staring at nothing, replaying moments I'd ignored. The way she'd defended my dad when he made inappropriate jokes. The way he'd started texting her directly instead of calling me. The times I'd come home to find them sitting a little too close on the couch, their laughter stopping abruptly when I walked in. All the evidence was there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 in the morning, I drove to my father's place. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to look him in the eye. Maybe I needed to confirm he was real, that this wasn't some elaborate hallucination my brain had constructed to punish me for something I couldn't name. His porch light was on. He answered the door in a robe, surprise flickering across his face before it was replaced by something like guilt, or maybe just fear at being caught. "Son," he said, "I was going to call you." I smiled. It felt wrong on my face. "Save it," I said. "I know." He looked older in that moment than I'd ever seen him. Smaller. "It was a mistake," he said. "I wasn't thinking straight." "You were thinking just fine," I said. "You just didn't care." He reached for me and I stepped back. "Don't," I said quietly. "You don't get to touch me." There was a long pause. In that pause, something settled inside me. A decision, maybe, or the seed of one. I drove home as the sky began to lighten, the world continuing on like nothing had happened. By the time Lauren came downstairs with a suitcase that morning, red-eyed but composed, I had already started planning. Not revenge in the dramatic sense. No screaming confrontations or public scenes. That would be too easy, too temporary. What I wanted was something lasting, something that would sit with them in the quiet moments when there was no one else to blame. Lauren stopped in the doorway. "I don't know where I'll go," she said. I shrugged. "Dad's place has a spare room." She recoiled like I'd slapped her. Good. That was the first crack. She left an hour later. I watched her car disappear down the street, then went back inside and opened my laptop. I took a sick day, then another. I started pulling bank statements, emails, old texts. I wasn't looking for dirt yet. I was mapping the terrain. People think revenge is about anger. It's not. Anger burns too hot. It rushes. Real revenge is about clarity, about understanding exactly who someone is, and then letting them see it too, reflected back at them from every direction. By the end of that week, I knew things about my marriage and my family that I'd never wanted to know, and I knew exactly where to start. This is only the beginning. After Lauren left, the house felt larger in a way that wasn't spacious but hollow. Sound traveled differently. Every footstep echoed. Every creak of the stairs sounded like an accusation. I didn't change the sheets that night. I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it cut the air into slow, useless circles. I kept thinking there would be some moment where the pain would spike, where I'd finally break down and cry or scream or punch a wall. It didn't come. Instead, there was this steady, suffocating pressure in my chest, like something heavy had settled there and decided to stay. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. That was the first thing that surprised me. I shaved, tied my tie, packed my lunch. Muscle memory carried me through the motions. At the office, people complained about late shipments and inventory errors. Someone burned popcorn in the break room microwave. Life went on. I realized then how alone betrayal really is. The world doesn't pause. It doesn't care that your entire internal structure just collapsed. It keeps asking you for emails and deadlines. Lauren texted me around noon. Just one line. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. My father called that evening. I watched his name light up my phone until it went dark again. Then he called again. And again. I blocked his number. It felt strangely ceremonial, like closing a door and locking it from the inside. That night I poured a drink I didn't really want and opened my laptop. I logged into our shared cloud account, the one we'd use for photos and documents and random household junk. I wasn't snooping yet. I was inventorying. 11 years of a shared life leaves traces everywhere, and I wanted to see them clearly. Photos from vacations where she smiled too brightly. Documents labeled with both our names. Spreadsheets for budgets we'd pretended mattered. I noticed how many files were hers, how many accounts she controlled, marketing salary, performance bonuses, side consulting gigs she'd never really talked about. She'd always been more ambitious than I was. I'd admired that. I wondered when admiration had turned into blind trust. 3 days later, she showed up at the house unannounced. I was in the garage, reorganizing tools I hadn't touched in years. Control through order. It was pathetic, but it helped. I knocked, she said from the doorway. You didn't answer. I know, I said without looking up. She stood there, arms crossed, like she was bracing herself against the cold. You can't just ignore this. I can, I said. And I am. She let out a shaky laugh. You're acting like a child. That got my attention. I straightened and looked at her. She looked tired but not regretful. Defensive, annoyed. Like this situation was inconvenient rather than catastrophic. You slept with my father, I said. If anyone's acting like a child here, it's not me. She swallowed. I didn't come here to fight. Then why are you here? She hesitated. He told me you blocked him. Correct. He's not doing well. Something flickered inside me then. Not sympathy, recognition. This was already becoming my responsibility again. Their mess, handed back to me like an obligation. That's unfortunate, I said. Her eyes narrowed. You're being cruel. No, I said calmly. I'm being accurate. She stepped closer. This isn't who you are. I almost laughed. You don't get to define who I am anymore. She stared at me, searching for something familiar, something she could still manipulate. When she didn't find it, her voice hardened. So what? You're just going to cut us both off and pretend none of this happened? No, I said. I'm going to remember it. She opened her mouth to say something else, then stopped. There it was, the first hint of fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of what I might do with that memory. She left a few minutes later, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I waited until her car was gone before sitting down on the concrete floor and letting my head fall into my hands. Not to cry, just to breathe. Over the next few weeks, patterns emerged. Lauren and my father were seeing each other openly now, at least in their own warped sense of openness. I heard it through mutual acquaintances, through my aunt who called to check in, through the silence that settled over family gatherings I stopped being invited to. She moved into his spare room. Then, not long after, they started looking at condos together. That part almost impressed me. The audacity, the confidence that this would all just work out. What they didn't realize was that while they were busy building their little scandalous fantasy, I was watching. Quietly, carefully. Lauren underestimated me. She always had. In our marriage, I was the stable one, the predictable one, the man who paid bills on time and didn't ask too many questions. She mistook that for passivity. My father made the same mistake. To him, I was still the boy who needed advice, who wanted approval. Neither of them understood what happens when you remove the last thing a person is trying to protect. I started with the finances. Not because I wanted money, but because money tells stories people don't realize they're telling. Lauren had been moving funds around for years, small amounts at first, consulting income routed through a separate account. Not illegal, just hidden. She'd framed it as independence when we talked about it vaguely. I saw now it was preparation, a parachute, packed long before the plane showed signs of trouble. Then there was my father. He'd given Lauren access to his accounts after my mother died. In case something happens to me, he'd said at the time. I remembered thinking it was odd, but also touching. Now I saw how deeply entangled their lives had become, long before she ever confessed. I didn't confront them. I didn't threaten. I didn't even acknowledge what I knew. I just documented. Screenshots, copies, timelines. I built a quiet, meticulous archive of their choices. The real shift came one evening when my Aunt Linda invited me to dinner. She was my mother's sister, blunt and perceptive in a way that made people nervous. They think you're spiraling, she said over a plate of overcooked pasta, that you're depressed, unstable. I smiled faintly. Do you? She studied me for a long moment. No, she said. I think you're very focused. That was the first time anyone had really seen me since that night in the kitchen. It felt like oxygen. They're planning to make it official, she added. Publicly. Engagement. Something like that. I nodded. I already knew. Good one, I said. She raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like the response of a man who's hurting. Oh, I'm hurting, I said. I'm just not in a hurry. That night, lying in bed alone, I finally allowed myself to imagine what revenge actually meant to me. Not humiliation, not destruction for the sake of it. I didn't want them ruined. I wanted them exposed to themselves. I wanted them to live inside the consequences of what they'd done without me needing to raise my voice or dirty my hands. And I knew exactly how to do it because people like Lauren and my father don't fear anger. They fear mirrors.